This is Talk Radio.
Keeping you up to date across the UK. Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
Patrick Christys on Talk Radio.
Evening, everyone. It is Patrick Christys on Talk, and I'm with you until 7 p.m. It's time for our big political panel, our big political debates, with Mike Buckley, Director of Campaign Central, and Joseph Silke, Communications Officer at Bright Blue. And there's a lot to talk about today. I'm having a look at our Twitter sphere at the moment, at Talk Radio. Loads of absolute out-and-out total hatred for Nadeem Zahawi, the Vaccines Minister, who said one thing and did another. Not for the first time, it's fair to say. He said there wouldn't be any mandatory COVID passports, and now indeed there are. It does make you wonder, doesn't it, whether or not this lot are either making it up as they go along, or whether they just don't mind lying to us in the first place. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us, and it's here where we're actually going to start. Mike, I've got a poll running at the moment. Would you vote Labour if they oppose the vaccine passport scheme? No, 52% yes. 52.3% yes. 47.7%. It's referendum territory, isn't it? But hey, I imagine that figure on Talk Radio polling until Keir Starmer decided he fancied growing a spine and maybe voting for something popular would have been about the 0% mark. So Keir needs to stick with this, doesn't he? You've got a whiff of electability now.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, but that's why you have me on, so that's fine. I'm personally quite a fan of vaccine passports, and you'd have seen this week that since it was announced that they're going to come in for nightclubs from the end of September, vaccination rates have gone up. People have been registering to get a vaccine. In my view, that is a good thing. It makes those people safer. It makes us all safer. So it is both a carrot and a stick. It's a stick because you're saying to people, you can't go to a nightclub if you don't have one of these things. And indeed have both jabs, which is why people are doing it now. It's also a carrot because it's to say, hey, if you want to go clubbing, good idea to get a vaccine. So personally, I think it's a good thing. I mean, you'll be highly displeased to hear that if I was running the country, then vaccine passports would be in place now, and then some people wouldn't be able to go clubbing for a while, and that would make them very sad, but it would make them be less COVID.
Do you go clubbing a lot, Mike?
Make me very happy.
You a clubber?
I'm not a massive clubber these days. No, I think my clubbing days are probably behind me.
Okay, well, hey, there you are.
No, they were.
Well, there you are. Yes, okay, all right. Well, Joseph, just respond to that, really. I mean, look, it looks as though now the Conservative Party, might get defeated essentially by a mixture of Tory rebels and the Stormtroopers over the old COVID passport stuff. What's your views?
They very well might. I mean, I don't entirely understand what the government's game is. It seems to be that they essentially are doing what you said, Mike, is they're basically just trying to encourage people to do this and hoping that then the vaccination rate increases to such an extent that they can pretty much abandon the plan. I think it's good that they've talked about pushing it back to September. I think it would have been very unfair to people of my age group. I only got my first vaccine at the end of June. If I couldn't go clubbing then because I didn't have enough time to get my second jab, I think that would have been pretty outrageous. So I think it's good at least that they've postponed it and might abandon it altogether. I'm worried about this sort of creeping Blairism. It sounds a bit like ID cards, which I'm quite uncomfortable with, but at the same time, going to be a bit boring here and slightly agree with Mike. And I am a realist. I do want people to get their vaccines. And so I can understand why they're saying this to try and increase, hopefully, just the vaccination rate.
Well, it's an interesting take on it from both of you, really. I think it kind of sums up how politically homeless a lot of people feel at the moment, doesn't it? I think traditional party lines, indeed what traditional people are maybe, where people on the left and the right would normally stand on these issues, sometimes now gets a bit crossed over, doesn't it, I suppose? But you're both broadly in favour of that. What about the pingdemic? Because today I led the show on the fact that the police are now saying it's going to take them a lot longer to get to crimes. It's the latest. It's a never-ending cycle. Every day I'm doing the pingdemic, and every day I can do it on a different topic, right? We've got food shortages in shops. We've got problems with the NHS, the education system, the police. Take your pick, right? Throw a dartboard at political topics, and in some way the pingdemic is affecting it. Do we just have to get rid of this track and trace app now? I mean, it is bringing Britain to its knees, isn't it?
It's not the app that's bringing Britain to its knees. It's the fact that cases are off the charts, and it drives me absolutely mad at the moment when I'm hearing this discussed all the time, and everybody's saying, isn't the app a problem? The app is a huge problem. It's not the app that's a problem. It's the fact that cases are 50,000 a day and likely to double.
But a million kids off school, only 47,000 of them had the old Rona, So, I mean, I suppose the app is a problem there.
It's absolutely terrible. And what I would like the government to do is act to bring cases down, but they have refused to do that for months now. I mean, they got rid of masks in schools on 17th of May, which was completely needless and unjustifiable. It doesn't do children any harm to wear a mask while they're at school. It means that they are more likely to be in school and be educated rather than be isolated and stay at home, either because they've got COVID or because they've been in contact with somebody who's got COVID. So if you're interested in children getting education, you should want children in a mask. And also, if you don't want children having coronavirus, and some of them do become ill, some of them for a very long time, you should want them in a mask. So what the government have done, against all of that, is take masks away, infects loads of children. Of course, they've got to isolate. And indeed, some of their parents, some of their grandparents, some of their other contacts would have become ill, some of them seriously. So there is no good outcome from taking masks away, and there's no good outcome from the pingdemic either.
I'm just going to lob that same one over to you now, Joseph, really, and say, why is this government deliberately committing kind of national harry-carry? I've got a feeling we're about to have this summer of discontent. I mean, bins aren't even being collected in vast swathes of the North and the Midlands. I mean, what next? We're not going to be able to bury the bodies.
It does sound remarkably similar to what I read about in my history textbooks, I have to say. Personally, I'm still wearing a mask in public transport. I think that people should generally wear masks in certain situations. The government hasn't made it mandatory, but I'm still doing it. I think the isolation rules are over the top. I think if you've had 2 jabs, you should have something like test to release. Why are all these people who've been double jabbed should have immunity? People who've also had COVID potentially as well, why they've been kept in isolation? I don't think that makes very much sense given how far ahead we are with the vaccination program. I think we squandered a lot of progress. But what I really want to know is the government's plan at this point to just infect everyone in their 20s, people in their teens, and they want to retain some sort of hybrid immunity? Because speaking from the perspective of somebody in their 20s, is the government's plan for me to get COVID? I've now had it, but a lot of my friends are concerned that the government's plan is just for people of our age to get COVID. And that's quite a big policy decision, to just make your own citizens sick in order to reach a policy goal of having herd immunity. I think the government needs to be honest about whether or not that's the plan, because it's a pretty bold plan.
Well, it certainly is, if indeed it is. Do you think that might be the plan, Mike?
I think it's completely the plan, and it worries me hugely for people like, my co-commentator this evening, because people are basically being forced into getting sick. Because people, of course, want to live their lives. They need to go shopping and they want to go to the pub. Maybe they want to go clubbing. People are being forced into being sick. Now, admittedly, if you're over 18, you have the choice of getting the vaccine. And that, of course, makes it less likely that you will become ill. For under 18s, they have no choice. And they often have no choice about what they do in the environments that they're in. As adults, we can choose whether it's going to crowded environments or not. Under 18s are normally forced to go to school, forced to go into other places just because that's the way they live their life, and parents make those decisions for them. We're forcing our children to become infected with a virus. We know that some of them die, very few, thankfully. We know that many more of them, about 10%, get long COVID, some of them for a very long time. There's about 9,000 in the UK that have had long COVID for 6 months or more. That's a lot of kids. Some of them are very, very ill. I've spoken to some of their parents. It's quite a harrowing experience. We don't know what those numbers are going to climb to as cases increase. We also don't know the long-term impacts of this virus. The previous SARS from about, it was over 10 years ago, it was 2003 maybe, I've forgotten. It was a long time ago. Anyway, scientists were discovering for over a decade afterwards the long-term complications that virus caused. Now, we might be really lucky. This coronavirus might be different, but maybe it's going to be like all the other coronaviruses and lead to long-term implications and complications for people's health that we don't know about. We're taking that risk with every child in the country. Okay,
Joseph, one of my concerns is civil unrest and lawlessness, basically, because I think if people do see a situation where, like we said, there's not enough food when they go into Tesco's or something like that, and their kids are all constantly off school, their bins aren't being collected in this heat as well, that's going to be a bit of an environmental disaster, one would imagine, if that continues. You've also got the fact that now if I was in desperate trouble and I called the police, potentially it might take them a lot longer to get to me than it would before. People start taking matters into their own hands. I think a lot of people have already had enough of this stuff. They might have lost their job. They might not have been able to pay the rent. It's kicked off, frankly, for a lot of people, right? And I do wonder whether or not we are going to see, as a result of the track and trace app and as a result of the pingdemic, actually more lawlessness.
I think it's very possible. I mean, a friend of mine, he's British Transport Police. He's currently in isolation. He's got COVID. He hasn't been able to work. And clearly that's happening to a lot of people across all different sections of society. I think it's quite remarkable how the government has managed to turn the whole COVID story around into being a massive success with the vaccine rollout. And now it appears to have all gone disastrously wrong. I don't know what the plan was. They knew there would be an exit wave. That was predicted. Why haven't they planned for this? Why don't they have a proper isolation system in place which keeps the people who we need to isolate? Because let's not forget, there are people who genuinely will be infectious. We do need them to isolate. We do need to protect people still. That hasn't gone away. But nevertheless, there's going to be people who, on balance, are probably not having to be in isolation. Why are we allowing all of this disruption to take place when it was entirely predictable?
Yeah, that is a good point in terms of, if the vaccine rollout has been an international triumph, then why on earth are we still where we are now? It's interesting, isn't it? We seem to be way ahead of the game when it came to the European Union. People were banging on, weren't they, about, I'm so glad I'm out of the EU. I was so glad I'm out of the EU now, because if otherwise we'd be trapped, wouldn't we, with their EU rollout system? Well,
it's humiliating.
It's got us nowhere, has it? I mean, we're still shackled to Chris Whitty's radiator in his basement, as I call it. We're still there, aren't we? And we're still not having any all these proper freedoms. We've still got mandatory COVID passports, etc. So it didn't really do us too much good. But thank you very much, Mike, and thank you very much, Joseph. Mike Buckley, there, director for Campaign Central. Joseph Silke, communications officer at Bright Blue. When we